The first time I saw the clause, it wasn't in a boardroom. It was on a wrinkled page inside a contract folder that smelled like burnt coffee and old money. I was sitting alone in my cubicle after hours, the office lights dimmed to night mode, the city outside our glass wall blinking like it didn't care if I lived or died. That night, I was still the woman who believed hard work spoke for itself. That night, I was still wrong. I'd been at Kessler & Klein Logistics for 5 years. Not glamorous, not loud, just steady. The kind of place where men in tailored suits called women kiddo and meant it like a leash. I was the director of compliance. Which sounds important until you realize your job is to stop disasters no one thanks you for preventing. I kept the company clean. And I kept my head down. Then one Monday morning, my boss, Darren Klein, called me into his office like he was doing me a favor by letting me breathe his air. Darren always looked freshly ironed, fresh haircut, fresh smile, fresh lies. He leaned back, hands folded over his stomach, and told me he had exciting news. "We're selling," he said. "Major acquisition. Big payout." I blinked. "Selling to who?" He grinned. "Bexler Capital. You've heard of them. Of course I had. Everyone had. Bexler Capital didn't buy companies. They swallowed them. They cut the bones for profit and tossed the employees like scraps. And the man behind it all, Calvin Bexler, was known for making grown executives tremble without raising his voice." "Don't worry," Darren said, watching my face. "They're keeping leadership. It's a partnership," I wanted to laugh. "Partnerships don't start with predators." I asked to see the draft agreement. Darren's smile tightened for half a second. "You'll see it when legal finalizes it." I nodded like a good employee. Then I went back to my desk and felt something cold settle in my stomach. That evening, I stayed late. Not because I was loyal, because I was scared. In compliance, fear is a tool. It keeps you alive. I pulled every file I could access: vendor contracts, customer agreements, the company's debt terms, anything with a signature. The acquisition wasn't just a sale, it was a transfer of risk. And Darren had always been allergic to risk, which meant he was hiding something. Around 9:40 p.m., the cleaning crew passed by, their carts squeaking, their faces blank. By 10:15, my eyes were burning from staring at tiny text. By 10:32, I found a folder marked Legacy Accounts, Restricted. That folder didn't belong in my system. It wasn't supposed to exist. I clicked anyway. A list of offshore vendors popped up. Strange payment schedules. Overlapping invoices. Then a contract, older than my time at the company, stamped with a crimson confidential. I opened it and felt my skin tighten. It was an umbrella supply agreement tied to one of our largest shipping lanes. It wasn't illegal on its face. But it had a clause in it. A clause so sharp it made my throat go dry. Change of control termination. If the company was acquired by an outside entity, the vendor could terminate immediately. And if that vendor terminated, the agreement triggered a cascade clause. It wasn't just one contract. It was 7. 7 linked agreements. If one fell, the rest could collapse like dominoes. It meant Kessler & Klein's biggest revenue stream could evaporate overnight if the vendor decided they didn't like the buyer. And Bexler Capital had a reputation that made people run. I sat back, trying to breathe. Then I saw the note attached to the contract. A handwritten note scanned into the system, so sloppy it looked like it was written in anger. Do not disclose to buyers. DK Darren Klein, my boss. He wasn't just hiding something, he was hiding a landmine. And then my phone buzzed. A calendar invite. 11 a.m. tomorrow. Subject, acquisition briefing, leadership only. Attendees included Darren, legal, finance, and Calvin Bexler, the predator himself. I stared at the screen until the letters stopped feeling real. In that moment, I understood something. Darren didn't plan to protect the company. He planned to protect himself. He'd sell us, cash out, and let the fallout hit everyone else. And if the landmine exploded after the deal, Darren would shrug and blame unforeseen contract issues. I could already hear his voice. I closed the folder, logged out, packed my bag, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. In the elevator down, my reflection looked pale and unfamiliar. By the time I got to my car, my fear had transformed into something else. Not courage. Not yet. Something darker. Something sharp. At home, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying Darren's smile. I kept imagining 100 people losing their jobs while he toasted champagne. I kept thinking about the vendor clause like it was a loaded weapon, and I kept wondering who else knew. By morning, I had mascara under my eyes and a decision in my bones. I would be in that briefing. I would hear what they said. And I would decide what kind of woman I was going to be. At 10:55, I walked into the executive conference room carrying a slim notebook and a calm face. Inside, the air smelled like expensive cologne and corporate confidence. Darren sat at the head of the table like a king. Next to him was our CFO, Martin, who looked like he hadn't blinked since the last recession. Legal was there too. Claire Winters, perfect bun, perfect posture, perfect poker face. And then the door opened. Calvin Bexler walked in like he owned gravity. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. He was mid-40s, tall, clean-cut, eyes like polished stone. He didn't look at the room the way normal people do. He scanned it like he was measuring where to place the knife. He sat down without asking. "Darren," he said, voice smooth. "Let's keep it efficient." Darren laughed too hard. "Of course, Calvin." Calvin's eyes moved to me. "Who's this?" Darren waved a hand. "Oh, that's just Director of Compliance," I said evenly. "Sloane Carter." Calvin studied me, like he was reading fine print on my face. Then he nodded once. "Good. Compliance people are either assets or problems." The room went still. I smiled politely. I tried to be neither. A flicker of something crossed his expression. Interest or irritation. Darren cleared his throat and launched into the presentation. He talked about synergy, about expansion, about shared vision. All the usual garbage that sounds pretty until you realize it's a funeral speech. Calvin listened without reacting. Then Martin pulled up a revenue slide. "Our lane contracts are stable," Martin said. "Long-term partners. Low volatility." I watched Darren's jaw tighten for the smallest second. There it was. The lie. Calvin leaned forward slightly. "Stable because of what terms?" Martin blinked. "Standard. Auto renewals." Calvin's eyes narrowed. "Standard is not a term." Claire from legal jumped in smoothly. "The agreements are well structured. Nothing unusual. I felt my heartbeat slow. They were doing it. They were all doing it. Lying together." Calvin tapped the table once. The sound was soft, but it silenced everyone. "I don't pay for surprises," he said. Darren forced a chuckle. "You won't get any." Calvin held Darren's gaze like he was testing him. Then he said, "Show me your top 10 contracts. Full terms. Not summaries." Claire's lips pressed together. "We can provide redacted versions after." "No," Calvin said calmly. "Now?" Darren's face flushed. "Calvin, we have confidentiality obligations." Calvin turned his head slightly as if Darren was a buzzing fly. "Darren, don't waste my time." The temperature in the room dropped. Claire glanced at Darren. Darren glanced at Martin. Martin swallowed. "We don't have them compiled." Calvin's eyes flicked back to me. "Compliance. Do you have them compiled?" I didn't answer right away. Because this was the moment that would define everything. If I spoke, I'd become a problem. If I stayed silent, I'd become a corpse in heels. I set my notebook down gently. "I can access them," I said. "If you want the full terms," Darren's head snapped toward me. His eyes warned me. "Shut up." Calvin leaned back. "Bring them." Darren's smile was thin enough to cut. "Sloane, we'll handle that." Calvin didn't look at Darren, she just offered. Let her. Darren's nostrils flared. It's not necessary. Calvin's voice stayed calm. It is for me. I stood up. I'll email the files within 10 minutes. Darren's gaze followed me as I left. I could feel his anger on my back like heat. In the hallway, my legs felt too light, my hands too steady. That's when I realized fear had finally left. Not because I was brave. Because I was past caring. In my office, I pulled up the contracts. My finger hovered over the vendor agreement. If I sent it, the landmine would be visible. Calvin would see it. The deal could die. The company could survive or collapse from the chaos. And Darren would know I did it. But if I didn't send it, I'd be complicit. I'd be protecting the man who would happily sacrifice me. I took a breath. And I sent the full bundle. All 10 contracts, including the one Darren told everyone not to disclose. Then I stared at my screen like it might start bleeding. 2 minutes later, Darren stormed into my office and shut the door so hard the glass rattled. His face was red, the polite mask gone. "What the hell did you just do?" he hissed. I sat back in my chair. My job. You exposed a sensitive clause. I exposed the truth. Darren leaned over my desk. "Do you understand what you've done? You could destroy this deal." I looked up at him. "Maybe it deserves to be destroyed." His eyes went cold. "You think you're a hero?" "No," I said softly. "I think you're a thief." For a moment, he didn't move. Then his mouth curved into a slow, ugly smile. "Oh," he whispered. "So that's what this is." He straightened, smoothing his suit like he was resetting the world. "You just made a very powerful enemy," Sloan. I held his stare. I already had one. I just finally saw him clearly. Darren's smile vanished. He walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "You think Bexler will protect you?" he said without turning around. "Men like him don't protect people. They use them." He opened the door. And before he stepped out, he added almost pleasantly, "Enjoy the attention while it lasts." Then he was gone. I sat there for a long time, listening to my own breathing. My inbox stayed quiet. No reply from Calvin, no reaction, just silence. The kind of silence that comes right before something breaks. At 2:17 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A man's voice, calm and measured. "Miss Carter," he said. "This is Calvin Bexler." My stomach tightened. Yes. There was a pause, like he was deciding which version of himself to show me. Then he said, "That clause you sent, who else knows about it?" I glanced at the glass wall of my office, where shadows moved outside like restless ghosts. "My boss," I said. "And legal. And finance." Another pause. "Did you know about it before last night?" he asked. "No." "Then you found it," he said, almost to himself. "And you chose to reveal it?" "Yes." His voice lowered. "Why?" I thought of Darren's smile, the layoffs, the champagne. I thought of the cleaning crew passing my cubicle like I was invisible. I thought of every time I stayed late to keep a company safe that wouldn't keep me safe back. "Because I'm tired," I said, "and because someone should be." Calvin exhaled slowly. "Meet me at 6:30, he said. "Raven Room, downtown." My throat went dry. "For what?" "So I can look you in the eye," he said, "and decide what you are." The line went dead. I stared at my phone like it was a weapon. Outside my office, Darren walked past with Claire and Martin. They were smiling again. But it wasn't the old confidence. It was the smile people wear when they've already planned your funeral. And I realized something else, something that made my skin prickle. Darren didn't just threaten me. He promised me that whatever came next wouldn't be an argument. It would be a move. A real one. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and looked at the darkening skyline. By tonight, I'd be sitting across from the man who could kill the deal with one word, and the man who would destroy me to keep it alive. Either way, the next chapter wasn't about contracts anymore. It was about survival. And I had a feeling Darren wasn't done hiding landmines. He was just getting started. The Raven room sat behind a black glass door with no sign, just a thin strip of amber light leaking out like a warning. Inside, the air was velvet dark. Low jazz. Low voices. The kind of place where people came to make decisions they wouldn't admit to in daylight. I walked in at 6:27, heart steady, hands cold. I wore my usual work armor, black blazer, neutral blouse, hair straight and sharp at my shoulders, but I'd added one thing. A small voice recorder clipped inside my bag. Not because I planned to trap anyone, because I'd finally learned that truth doesn't matter unless you can prove it. A hostess led me to a booth in the back where the shadows were deeper. Calvin Bexler was already there. He didn't rise, he didn't smile, he just watched me approach like he was measuring the distance between useful and replaceable. I slid into the booth across from him. His drink was untouched. "Miss Carter," he said. "Mr. Bexler." He studied my face for a long second, then said, "You don't look like someone who panics." "I panicked last night," I said. "I'm done now." A flicker in his eyes. Almost approval. "Good," he said softly. Panic makes people predictable. A waiter appeared. Calvin ordered without looking at the menu. I asked for water. The waiter left. Calvin leaned back slightly. "The clause is real. It's enforceable. And it's ugly." I kept my expression neutral. "You're surprised?" "I don't like being surprised," he said. "Especially by a company trying to sell itself as stable." I chose my words carefully. "Then you should walk." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket and placed a thin folder on the table between us. "No branding," he said. "No letterhead. I didn't touch it." "What is it?" "A background summary," he said. "On you." My throat tightened, but I kept my face calm. "Already?" I asked. Calvin's mouth barely moved. People who disrupt deals get checked. I stared at the folder like it might bite. "Am I clean?" I asked. "You're boring," he said, which is rare. I almost laughed, but it came out as a breath. He continued. "No lawsuits, no scandals, no debt worth mentioning, no job hopping, no chaos." His eyes lifted to mine. "But you showed teeth today," I held his gaze. "Teeth don't mean I'm rabid." He nodded once, as if confirming something. "Here's what you did," he said. "You saved me from buying a corpse wrapped in perfume, and now you want to use me," I said. Calvin's lips curved faintly. Yes, there it was. No sugar, no pretending, just the truth. "I'm not interested in being your pawn," I said. "You already are," he replied calmly. "You just don't know whose board you're on yet." My stomach tightened. He tapped the folder. "The clause gives me leverage. But if I pull out, Darren keeps his secret for the next buyer. He wins. And if you stay?" I asked. Calvin's eyes sharpened. "Then I restructure the deal. I cut out the rot. I make the company profitable. People keep their jobs." I didn't believe him. Not fully. Men like Calvin didn't wake up wanting to protect strangers. But I believed he hated being lied to. And sometimes hate is a stronger motivator than mercy. "You think Darren is the rot," I said. Calvin's voice dropped. "I think Darren is not the only rot." The waiter returned with my water. Calvin didn't touch his drink. He leaned forward. "You work in compliance. You see the veins of the company." I didn't answer. He continued, "I want you to find out what else they're hiding." My pulse stayed steady, but my skin felt tight. "I'm not a spy," I said. Calvin's gaze didn't move. "You're already a target. Darren will cut you out the first chance he gets. He'll smear you. He'll bury you." He paused. "Or you can become valuable enough that he can't." I swallowed. "And what do I get?" I asked. Calvin didn't hesitate. "Protection. A contract. A promotion. And a clean exit if you want it later." I watched him. There was a cold logic to it. a trap that came with velvet lining. If I say no? I asked. Calvin's voice stayed soft. Then you go back to work tomorrow and Darren starts burning you alive in small, legal ways. I stared into my water. I thought of Darren's smile. I thought of the way he'd looked at me after I sent the contracts, like I'd stepped into his living room and spit on his carpet. I looked up. What exactly do you want? I asked. Calvin's eyes stayed on mine. Evidence. Paper. Something that turns your suspicion into a blade. My breath came slow. And if I find something? I asked. Calvin's mouth barely moved. Then Karma finally gets a phone number. He slid the folder toward me. I didn't open it. Is this your idea of a job offer? I asked. It's a lifeline, he said. Take it or don't. I stared at the folder for one more beat, then pulled it closer. Not because I trusted him, because I didn't trust Darren, and because I'd learned the hard way that survival doesn't wait for perfect options. I left the Raven room at 7:19. The city felt different at night, less friendly, more honest. The cold air made my lungs sting. I didn't go home. I drove back to the office. Our building wasn't supposed to be accessible after hours unless you had executive clearance, but compliance had keys for emergencies. And I was starting to realize my life was one long emergency. The lobby was empty. Security was half asleep behind the desk. I nodded like I belonged, and he barely looked up. Upstairs, the office was dark, lit only by the glow of exit signs and the distant pulse of the server room. The silence felt heavy, like the building was holding its breath. I went straight to the restricted folder again. And then I widened the search. Payment approvals, vendor onboarding, contract amendments, patterns. That's what compliance people see, not single crimes. Systems. By 9:41, I found something that made my blood run cold. An internal email chain between Darren, Martin, and Claire. Subject line. Acquisition timing. The messages were short and cautious, like people whispering through text. Martin, if the vendor clause is disclosed, buyer will demand concession. Claire, then it cannot be disclosed. Darren, we're aligned. After close, it's not our problem. My throat tightened. That wasn't just unethical. That was intentional deception. And deception in a corporate acquisition can become fraud fast. I saved it. Then I found another chain. Subject, legacy accounts, stabilize. Claire, we need a clean narrative for offshore payments. Martin, I can reroute through Meridian Consulting. Darren, do it. Keep it off diligence, Meridian Consulting. I typed the name into the system. A vendor profile popped up. No website, no physical address, just a P.O. box and a bank routing number. The invoices were vague, consulting services, advisory fees, strategic alignment. The amounts were not vague. Hundreds of thousands. Then millions. My hands went cold. I pulled the payment history. Meridian Consulting was receiving regular transfers, always just under internal review thresholds. Smart. Calculated. Like someone understood exactly how to hide in plain sight. I leaned back, staring at the screen. If Meridian was a shell, then where was the money going? I opened the bank details. Cross-referenced the routing information. And there it was. A connection, a link to an offshore account tied to a trust. And the trust was associated with a name I recognized instantly. Not Darren's, not Martin's, Claire's. Claire Winters, General Counsel. The woman with the perfect bun and perfect posture. My mouth went dry. Legal wasn't just covering the lie. Legal might be the lie. I copied everything. Emails, vendor profiles, payment logs. I made 2 backups. One in a secure drive. One on an encrypted USB that I slipped into my pocket like it was a heartbeat. At 11:58, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Just 2 words. Still alive? Calvin. I typed back. For now, a second message arrived almost instantly. Good. Tomorrow will be worse. I stared at it. Then I felt my stomach drop as footsteps echoed down the hallway outside my office. Slow. Purposeful. Not the cleaning crew. I turned my screen brightness down and went still. The footsteps stopped near my door. A shadow crossed the frosted glass. Then the door handle moved. Gently. Testing. My pulse stayed controlled. Someone had a key. The handle stopped. Then the footsteps moved on. I held my breath until the sound faded. When it was quiet again, I stood up and locked my door from the inside. My hands finally shook. Because now it wasn't theoretical. Darren wasn't just angry. He was hunting. I left the office at 12:23 a.m., taking the stairs instead of the elevator. Every sound felt amplified. Every corner felt like a trap. Outside, the parking lot was cold and empty. My car sat under a flickering light like it was the only thing in the world. I got in, locked the doors, and didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no approaching headlights. I started the car and drove home. But when I pulled into my apartment complex, I saw something that made my stomach clench. A black sedan idling across the lot. No lights, no movement, just presence. I drove past it like I hadn't noticed. Parked on the far side, walked to my building with my keys between my fingers like claws. I didn't look back. Inside my apartment, I locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. Then I opened Calvin's folder. Inside was a formal agreement draft, employment, consulting, confidentiality. A new role title. Special Compliance Liaison, Acquisition Transition. It came with a salary bump big enough to make my head spin, and a single line that mattered more than money. Termination protection and indemnification provided by Bexler Capital. Protection. He meant it, or he meant it enough to put it on paper. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from Darren. Subject: Urgent meeting, 8:00 a.m. No greeting, no explanation, just a calendar invite. My throat tightened. He was moving. I checked my company access logs. And then I saw it. An access attempt on my system. At 12:06 a.m. from an admin account. Not mine. They were trying to get in, to wipe, to alter, to plant something. I sat down hard on my couch. The air felt thin. If Darren and Claire were laundering money through Meridian, and if the acquisition threatened to expose them, then I wasn't just an inconvenience. I was evidence with a pulse. And people like that don't negotiate with evidence. They destroy it. I pulled out the encrypted USB and held it in my palm. It felt small for something that could end careers. Or end me. I opened a notepad and started writing down what I knew. Step by step, like a confession. Then I typed an email to Calvin. Not long, not emotional, just facts. I found a shell vendor called Meridian Consulting. Payments rerouted offshore. Links suggest Claire Winters. I have emails and logs. Darren called an urgent meeting for 8 a.m. They attempted access to my system after midnight. I hovered over send. Then I thought of Calvin's cold eyes. Assets or problems. I hit send. Immediately, my phone rang. Calvin again. I answered. His voice was calm. Do not go to that meeting alone, he said. My mouth went dry. How bad is it? Calvin paused, just long enough to scare me. Bad enough that you did the right thing by contacting me first, he said. Listen carefully. I sank into the couch, gripping the phone. Tomorrow, he continued, they will try to force you into a mistake. They will bait you. They will threaten you. They may offer you money. My stomach twisted. And if that fails, I whispered. Calvin's voice lowered. Then they will try to make you look like the criminal. I felt cold spread through my chest. You mean frame me? Yes, he said simply. And because you're compliance, it will be believable. My throat tightened. What do? I asked. Calvin's answer was immediate. You become untouchable, he exhaled slowly. At 7:30 a.m., a car will pick you up. You will not drive yourself. You will not meet Darren alone. You will bring your evidence to me. My hands trembled. And then? I asked. Calvin's voice sharpened, just a little. Then we stopped being polite. The line went dead. I sat in the dark, phone in my lap, heart steady again in the strangest way. Because once someone tells you exactly how the knife is coming, you stop being afraid of the unknown. You start planning where to put your hands. I didn't sleep that night. I showered, dressed, packed my evidence in layers, USB, printed logs, screenshots in a sealed envelope. I stared at myself in the mirror until my eyes looked like someone else's. Not the woman who kept her head down. Not the woman who believed hard work spoke for itself. A woman who understood something Darren had never considered, that quiet women don't stay quiet forever. At 7:28 a.m., I stood outside my building, the winter air biting my skin. A black car pulled up. The window lowered. A driver I didn't recognize looked at me calmly. "Miss Carter?" he asked. "Yes." "Mr. Bexler sent me," he said. "Get in." I looked across the lot. The black sedan from last night was gone. But that didn't comfort me. It meant they'd moved. I got into the car. The door shut with a soft, final sound. As we pulled away, my phone buzzed again. A text from Darren. "Don't be late. HR will be present." My stomach tightened. HR. The corporate executioners. I stared at the message, then looked out the window as the city blurred by. And for the first time, I understood the full shape of what I'd stepped into. This wasn't just about a contract clause anymore. This was about power. About who gets buried and who gets to do the burying. Because by the end of today, Darren wouldn't just try to ruin my career, he would try to erase me. And I was done being erasable. The car didn't take me to the office, it took me to Bexler Capital's downtown headquarters. Glass. Steel. Silence. The kind of building that doesn't need a sign because everyone already knows who owns it. The driver opened the door and said nothing. I stepped out, clutching my bag like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Inside, the lobby smelled like money and control. No clutter, no noise, just clean lines and quiet authority. Calvin was waiting for me in a private conference room on the top floor. No assistants, no entourage. Just him, standing by the window, looking down at the city like it owed him something. "You made it," he said without turning. "Yes." He finally faced me. "You bring everything?" he asked. I placed my bag on the table and pulled out the envelope, the USB, the printed emails. All of it. Calvin didn't touch them yet. He studied my face first. "They're going to try to destroy you today," he said calmly. "I know." "And you're still here," he said. I met his gaze. "So are you." A corner of his mouth lifted, not a smile, recognition. He finally sat and reviewed the documents. Slowly. Carefully. The room felt airtight. As he read, something in his expression shifted. Not shock, not anger. Confirmation. "Meridian Consulting," he said quietly. "Claire's trust, yes." "And Darren approved the routing," he added. "Yes," he leaned back. "They weren't just hiding risk," he said. "They were laundering it." My hands clenched in my lap. "What happens now?" I asked. Calvin looked at me steadily. "Now," he said, "we reverse the power." At exactly 8:02 a.m., Darren called me. I didn't answer. At 8:04, Claire emailed. Subject: immediate attendance required. I ignored it. At 8:07, Martin called. Straight to voicemail. Calvin watched the phone light up like it was a performance. "They're panicking," he said. At 8:15, he continued, "They'll escalate." As if on cue, my phone rang again. This time, it was HR. Calvin nodded. "Put it on speaker," I answered. "Sloan," the HR director said, voice tight. "You failed to attend a mandatory meeting. I'm unavailable, I said evenly. Your presence is required immediately, she said. There are concerns about your conduct. Calvin leaned forward slightly. What kind of concerns? I asked. There was a pause. Potential misconduct related to confidential disclosures, she said. There it was, the frame. I'll have my counsel contact you, I said. Silence. Your counsel? She repeated. Yes, I said. Bexler Capital's legal team. The line went dead. Calvin exhaled once. Well done, he said. My pulse stayed steady. 10 minutes later, Calvin's head of legal entered the room with a tablet. Authorities have been notified, she said calmly. White-collar unit. Financial crimes. My stomach dropped. You're calling the police? I asked. Calvin didn't blink. I don't play games when someone lies to me with intent, he said. He turned to his lawyer. Timeline? They'll arrive at Kessler & Klein within the hour, she said. I thought of Darren, sitting smugly in his office, waiting to crush me with HR paperwork. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. At 9:11 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Darren. This time I answered. Sloan, he said, voice smooth but strained. We need to talk. We already did, I said. No, he replied. We didn't. I could hear movement behind him. Voices. Tension. You made a mistake, he said. A serious one. I leaned back in my chair. You tried to access my system after midnight, I said calmly. That was your mistake. Silence. Then a breath. You don't know what you're doing, he said. I know exactly what I'm doing, I replied. And so does Calvin. Another pause. You think he's on your side? Darren asked softly. He'll discard you the second you're inconvenient. Maybe, I said. But today, I'm useful. His voice dropped. What do you want? He asked. There it was. The negotiation. I want you to resign, I said. Today, a sharp inhale. You don't have that power, he snapped. I have emails, I said. Payment logs. Offshore trusts. And a buyer who hates surprises. The line stayed quiet. Then Darren laughed. A thin, broken sound. You think you win because you found a paper trail? He said. People like me don't go to jail. People like you, I said softly, always think that before he could respond, the door behind him must have opened. I heard unfamiliar voices. Clear. Official. Mr. Klein? Darren swore. The line went dead. I stared at my phone. My hands didn't shake. At 9:34 a.m., Calvin received confirmation. Search warrants executed. Servers seized. Claire detained for questioning. Martin escorted out. Darren removed from the building in front of his staff. No announcement, no explanation, just absence. At 10:10 a.m., the acquisition was paused indefinitely. At noon, Calvin issued a statement. Due diligence revealed material misrepresentations. We will proceed with restructuring leadership and preserving operational integrity. Corporate language. Clean. Deadly. By 3:00 p.m., my name was cleared internally. By 4:30, I was offered a formal role under Bexler Capital with independent authority. I sat in the same conference room staring at the contract. This doesn't make me safe forever, I said. Calvin nodded. Nothing does. Then why do this? I asked. He considered me. Because you didn't flinch, he said, and because systems only change when someone inside them breaks the silence, I signed. Not because I trusted him, but because I trusted myself now. Weeks passed. Investigations deepened. Charges followed. Claire's trust unraveled. Meridian Consulting vanished like it had never existed. Darren tried to fight, tried to spin, tried to blame me. But evidence doesn't care about ego. The company survived. Smaller. Cleaner. Some people thanked me quietly, others avoided me completely. That was fine. Power is lonely when it's earned honestly. One evening, months later, I ran into Darren outside a courthouse. He looked older, smaller. The suit didn't fit the same. He saw me and froze. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he laughed bitterly. You ruined me, he said. I tilted my head. No? You exposed yourself, I continued. I just stopped you from lying about it. His jaw tightened. You think this makes you better? He asked. I looked at him, not with anger, not with triumph, just clarity. No, I said. It makes me free. I walked past him without another word. Outside, the city felt different again. Louder, brighter, alive. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't a victim. I was just a woman who found a clause in a contract and decided her silence was worth more than their comfort. Karma didn't roar. It didn't announce itself. It arrived quietly, with paperwork, with timing, with truth. And this time, it had my signature on it.